Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles. Welcome back to their full card breakdown, this time for UFC Vegas 101, the very first fight card in 2025. We have ourselves a brand new year, the same old fights. And you know what? I'm excited to have some fights back. We had ourselves a nice little break over the holidays, and now we got 14 fights on slate, all headlined by Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas in a good-looking main event, to say the least. No, it should be a fun card here. Happy to break it down as always, but there's a couple things we have to mention before we get back into some fights. First off, as always, all my premium content can be found on Establish the Run. I do a podcast over there with Brett Appley every Thursday, as well as my rankings, and I do help out a little bit of projections over there, so check out Establish the Run, should be linked down below, as well as CoolBet, who do sponsor these videos. And second, I do run a year-long contest. If you follow me on Twitter, I apologize for spamming your timeline because I've been mentioning a lot, but year-long contest, MMA DFS, I've been hosting it for, this will be my fourth year hosting it now. You just enter a lineup weekly and you compete for points. If you want any more information, or if you want to get in on the year-long contest, we'd be happy to have you. DM me on Twitter at GamblesGordo, or leave a comment down below. I'm looking forward to another year of year-long MMA contests like this, and it's been fun hosting it, so we'd love to have you guys in it. But with that out of the way, let's not waste any more time. As always, we're going to break down all these fights from both a DraftKings and a betting perspective. Hopefully do it, in a timely manner, get it all out of the way, talk 14 fights, but all should be timestamped down below. Speaking of, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, show some love, and let's do this. We have the fight night started with the 9-0 Narulo Aliev versus the short notice replacement 13-5 Joe Solecki. Joe Solecki, someone who we have seen more often. He's been in the UFC for a while. He is a very solid grappler. That's kind of his best attribute. He can have good top control as well, and against his low level of competition, he steamrolls them on the ground. On the feet, his striking is not all there. His durability is definitely in question, and although he's got some solid wrestling, we've also seen him stalking his back before, albeit to some decent UFC wrestlers. Narulo Aliev is a bit younger fighter, 24 years old, only a couple performances under the UFC name, but he's looked good so far, and he has kind of reflected that with his big favorite price tag this week. He's got solid top control, very strong on top with a decent submission game. I don't know if it's better than Solecki's here, but someone who does want to get this fight to the ground. So it's the battle between two relatively inexperienced strikers, both want to get down to the ground, just one who is more so happy to play off his back with the jiu-jitsu world, and one who I would favor a lot in the wrestling if this was a wrestling match, someone who is more physically imposing, a little bit of a younger fighter as well. I do think Solecki is always live to go out there, maybe land a submission. I mean, Aliev is still young, facing lower level competition, but I favor Aliev's durability. I favor his aggression. I favor his wrestling and top control, and I do think he's able to win minutes from top position and even threaten positions. I was a bit surprised to see the line the way it is when it comes to totals. I do think an under is live. I don't think Solecki's winning this fight unless he's getting a sub, and he has been finished before. Any Joe Solecki fight is one that I do see is going to the distance, so maybe I'll sprinkle a little bit at these plus 200 odds, but a fight where I do favor Aliev, I do think he's able to go out and get his wrestling going and impose his will from top position. Just depends how aggressive he gets, if he opens himself up for a submission, or if he gets aggressive enough to go for that finish. I do think an under is live here, but give me Aliev to get it done. DraftKings-wise, Aliev is 9.5K, a steep price tag to get to. I know he has a wrestling path to victory and control time, and people have scored well against Solecki, but to pick him over a Smith, Almeida, Tulio is a bit harder to get to. I think he's a secondary pivot play, whereas Solecki is just a pure dart throw. I don't think Solecki wins without a submission, so at 6.7K, his win condition scores very well, but not my favorite fight to target as a whole. I do think that there could be some GPP leverage on the Aliev side of things, but in single entry, definitely not a guy I'm forcing into my lineups. Then we have the 8-1 Victoria Dudakova and the 6-1 Fatima Kline. Fatima Kline, huge hyped up prospect, came in last time against Canadian girl Jasmine Jasdavicius, and up a weight class on short notice, really just got sizable lead, and she put up a really good account for herself, because I do think Fatima Kline is a phenomenal fighter, but the circumstances were on her side. Now she gets a full camp at her weight class, and is someone who is just, she's going to be a problem at the UFC here. Very, very good jiu-jitsu game. That's kind of what she's known for, but her hands are coming together. Solid power on the feet as well, solid wrestling, and someone who, if she does get you on the mat, can definitely get you out of there. She's facing someone, Victoria Dudakova, who you've been following the channel for a while. I haven't been the highest on her. She came in pretty highly regarded. I even bet Estela Nunes against her, but someone who just is under that prototype of Russian wrestler, does want to get that top position, but lacks this defensive striking and hand speed on the feet, puts herself in precarious situations on the mat, and still hasn't really been tested against a good level of competition, and that was shown last time when she did drop the ball to Sam Hughes. So in this matchup here, yes, it's a massive price tag and a massive price you have to pay on someone like Fatima Kline, but I favor Kline's striking, her hand speed, I favor her physicality, I favor her overall pure technical wrestling, and I extremely much That's not a word, but I do extremely favor her on the mat in terms of jiu-jitsu as well. I think she's got all these intangibles going for her, and I do think she's a better technical fighter. At her weight class, she should shine. Now, am I paying for this price tag? On the money line, probably not, but I do think she gets it done inside the distance. Victoria Dudakova pulled someone over her in a full mount, much lower level competition, so I think Kline looks to put on a statement. She has a good history of finishing fights, and I think she can get one here. So maybe I'll sprinkle in some inside the distance line at plus 200. I do think she gets it done. DraftKings-wise, she's a solid cash play because I do think she can get wrestling. I do think she can get win minutes here at a high clip, but 9.8K is expensive to get to, especially for a WMMA bout. So I prefer other options. Cash, maybe, but certainly a really risky GBP play to pay up for that much. Whereas Dudakova, I don't see her winning too often, so it's not someone I'm getting to. Give me Fatima Kline. I think she puts herself on the map and regains that hype, and that price tag definitely reflects that here. So give me Fatima Kline. And then we have one of my favorite fights on the card. We have Magomed Gadzhiyasulov versus Bruno Lopes. 13-1 Lopes, 9-0 Gadzhiyasulov. Very interesting matchup because these are two fighters who I don't think are going to have too much success long term. Bruno Lopes showed that although he's got a solid all-rounded skill set, he's a way better handler than he's a nail. He was finished on Dynamite Tennis Shoes the first time, was able to come back and bounce back in that performance there. But although he has all these offensive skill sets, solid wrestling, solid jiu-jitsu, decent volume strike in the feet as well, his chin was hit. He did look to slow down a bit in these fights, and he is someone who there's definitely some red flags around him. Gadzhiyasulov has had a couple performances before. He has looked phenomenal in his striking arsenal. We know he can strike for sure. We know he can mix in takedowns, but his cardio has been in question. His defense has been in question. His leg kicks have definitely hurt him in the past. And he is someone who still isn't completely proven at this level. Someone who, you know what, can be taken down, can be hit in the feet as well, and gas tank has also been a question. So there are question marks on both sides of things, but I do think it makes for a fun bout. One where I do think inside the distance, I might play that line there because I do think both these fighters have their paths. I would favor Lopes on the ground. I do think he's got a solid top game. I do think he can work pretty well from top position and threaten stuff there, especially if the fight goes longer. But I do favor Gadzhiyasulov on the feet. He is not the biggest volume guy, but a lot of different arsenals in his striking weapons, and I do think he has the opportunity and the length to hurt someone like Lopes who's been dropped before. So I favor that finishing upside on the feet of someone like Gadzhiyasulov. I favor his striking, and I do think more times than not, he can probably get an early finish. So the line might be a bit wide. I think there is some value to be had on Lopes here, but I do think Gadzhiyasulov is able to find that finish early. If it does go to the ground, though, I maybe favor the Lopes side of things. So very interesting matchup here. Favor the under on DraftKings. Gadzhiyasulov at 8.8K is a solid play for me. I mean, he did score 97 last time, but that was in a decision win. I think a finish is definitely on the table, whether it be a finish from strikes or maybe even going in there and taking advantage of a more tired Lopes as the fight goes on. But very, very live. Whereas I think Lopes has too. This is a fight I want to target as a whole. 7.4K. I think Lopes can have some ground success. If I think he wins, I think it comes inside the distance. So he's a very live play at 7.4, who I do think may win more than the line entails. So gun to my head, give me Gadzhiyasulov, but a fight I want to target both sides on DraftKings. Should be a pretty fun one. Then we have the 5-1-1 Ernesta Kareckaite versus the 8-2 Nicole Caliari. And this is another very interesting one, a very tough one for me to call if I'm being honest, because I'm confused at what either one of these bring to the table. Carrot Cake, as we like to call her, is someone who I love her volume. I backed her last time in a close fight there. She's got incredible volume, incredible cardio, and she throws a ton of output. And although she can be taken out, she does get up pretty good. I like her resiliency. She's fun to watch, but she's someone who does not have the most power in her punches, is more volume-based, and definitely eats a lot of damage. So the optics aren't always on her side in those decisions. Caliari, I think, is going to be the more potent striker. I like her power and her hand speed, and I do think she doesn't have the same volume as Carrot Cake, but she can definitely go out there and strike with her, and I do think land the more impactful shots. But I don't know how much she's going to go out here, and I think she has the grappling path to victory. I think she is the better pure grappler than Carrot Cake, but she's never really the one to go out there and initiate the wrestling exchanges. Usually people wrestle against her, she's able to reverse them, but here I think if she wants to go to it, she can. So in a fight like this, if this was -110, maybe I just take the shot on Carrot Cake because I do think she can go out there and land more volume and win the optics that way. But I'm going to go with the dog here. The dog price is wide. I'm going to take some Caliari here. I think she can get some wrestling opportunities. I think her power, her volume, her optics, and just her hand speed look very, very good in comparison to Carrot Cake. And if she can match that volume on the feet, I do think she could win a very close fight here, one where I'm surprised to see her as big of a dog as she is. So a very close fight there. Am I going to get to Kareckaite at 9.2K? Probably not. Her volume makes her actually pretty enticing. Like her volume, where she landed 180 strikes on Dynamite Contender Series, makes her maybe a solid, like complete contrarian play at 9.2K because I don't see her being too popular. But I don't think she's going to finish here. Not much grappling path to victory. She is purely based off of volume. Whereas Caliari, I think she has power. I think she's facing an opponent who's there to be hit. And I think that she also could have a grappling path to victory. So 7K, I'll play some Nicole Caliari, a fight that I do expect to go the distance, a fight where I think there's some wrestling involved. 7K, she could be the steal of the DraftKings tournament this week. So definitely a pretty good floor on her and a pretty high ceiling if she gets there as well. Give me the dog in Caliari. I'm surprised to see her at that price tag, and I do think she wins more than the line of tails. And then we have the 11-5 Preston Parsons versus the 9-0 Jacoby Smith on last season of Dana White Contender Series, a show where I do a show every week with Liam Picks Fights and Big Bird, so make sure to check that out when it does come back on air. But Jacoby Smith's one of my favorite prospects off the show. I think he was my favorite prospect this season. He absolutely dominated a Canadian and looked amazing in the prospect. This guy is a phenomenal wrestler, former D1 at Oklahoma State, but someone who has really mixed in the arts together well. He's showed some good jiu-jitsu as well, very good top position, and his striking is really coming along as well. This guy is a freak athlete, a ton of power, good hand speed, and although he hasn't really been testing as the best level in competition, his wrestling is top tier, his power is evident on the feet, and he has shown nothing but dominance so far. Face someone Preston Parsons who I love. I love his grinding style. He always goes forward. He is a guy who you definitely want to have your money on because he's got so much heart, so much resiliency, and he will fight for your money. He's got great wrestling to go along with it as well. But in a spot like this, although Jacoby Smith is not really tested and there could be some ways he loses this fight, I love the guy. And I think when you compare the two, I favor Smith's physicality, I favor Smith's pure technical wrestling, and I favor Smith's striking and power on the feet as well against Ken Parsons, who has been knocked out, who can be hit. So although there's a world where maybe Smith gets tired, maybe the pressure of Parsons is too much later on, when they're fresh, I favor Jacoby Smith by a wide margin. I favor his wrestling, his technicality, his strength. I do think he's the way better technical wrestler. He's a little bit shorter, but you look it up, he's a guy who did wrestle at a higher weight, whereas Parsons has fought at 155 before, right? So give me Jacoby Smith. I think his wrestling's top tier. I think he's mixed up the striking as well, and I do think he will have an advantage in this fight here. Short notice replacement, but a guy who I do rate very, very highly, so let's hope he delivers. 9-0 here, he is someone who is at 9.4K on short notice. I think he's got early knockout upside. He's got a ton of wrestling upside as well. The guys look dominant, and I do want some of him. I think we compare him to Aliev, way more finish upside, someone who will go for the finish and does have an opponent who has been knocked out in the first round before. Give me Jacoby Smith. I like him for his win equity here and the ability to win about the feet and the mat. This guy, I think, could be the real deal. I'm excited to see how he performs. Preston Parsons could be another one of those punt plays because I don't think he wins without it going the distance, without him landing a few takedowns as the fight goes on, and not with him landing a ton of volume. The issue is he's 7.8K, but like a plus 300 underdog, so tough for me to get to him too often. Give me Jacoby Smith. Like I said, I do think this guy's a real deal, and I'm hoping to see if he delivers. Then we got the 18-8 Thiago Moises versus the 18-6 Trey Ogden. Two UFC veterans going at it here, and I do think it's a pretty fun fight. Trey Ogden is that more meat and potatoes type of guy. He's got solid physicality, solid boxing, and pretty good wrestling. He is pretty well-rounded, but not the biggest finisher, is not going to excel in the striking. He can be a wrestler in his own right. The guy is just, he's there. He's consistent, he's strong, he's well-rounded. I respect it. Whereas Thiago Moises is more of a specialist. He thrives when he's in control. He's a phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's got solid wrestling as well, but he can be backed up against the cage. He can be hit in his own right. He is not as well-rounded as someone like Trey Ogden here, but I do rate him out as the better pure jiu-jitsu practitioner and better pure wrestler. You add in the fact that he's got youth on his side. He fights out of a very, very good camp. I'm going to take Thiago Moises this week, and it's not with the utmost certainty. I do think there's a world where Trey Ogden can use his physicality, maybe stick and move on the outside to defend takedowns, but if this fight goes to the ground at all, I favor Moises by a large margin. Trey Ogden has been submitted 3 times, and Moises is a phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner. I do think if he gets him down there, he can work the back, and I do think he can threaten to finish with someone like Ogden. On the feet, I think it's close, but you still have a lot of variety from Moises type, and he's not facing an absolute killer who will stalk him and knock him out like a Joel Alvarez. He's facing someone who kind of wants to take you to decision, no offense to Ogden. So I like Ogden. I do think he's been on a roll improving recently, but I favor Moises in more aspects of the game, especially on the ground, and I will take him here. DraftKings-wise, I don't mind Moises at the price tag of 8.3K. In his last 3 wins, he scored 92, 113, 102. All 3 of them finishes. The guy has a lot of finishing equity on his side of things here, and I do think if he wins, there's submissions live against Ogden. So 8.3K, one of my favorite GPP plays in this mid-range. I think Ogden could have some good success as well. I'm not picking him to win, right? So if you are on the side where you're like, okay, maybe he can get some takedowns of his own right, maybe he'll win the fight on the outside, he could have some success, but in fights where he just jabs from the outside, he scored 53 against Mata, 64 against Zellhuber. Not my favorite option here. So give me Moises. I do think he has ground success, and for that reason, it's a solid GPP play on DraftKings. Then we have this 12-1 Marco Tulio versus the 21-7 Ior Potieria. Now, Ior Potieria has been in the UFC for a while. Might be fighting for a job here, but someone who I've been fading from the start. He has not looked the same as he was in the regional scene. Someone who has a ton of power, but no defense. no cardio. His chin's a bit suspect, and he's just slower to the punch. Does he have power? Of course he does. He can knock your lights out, but he can also be taken down. He just has way too many holes in his game to be at this level, and he's been facing some absolute killers, to be fair. Now, he fared his own pretty well against Almeida last time, but still someone who has been finished in his 4 losses before that, now facing a pretty hyped up prospect from Brazil who does have a ton of power. It seems like a setup spot here for Tulio. Now, Tulio is not someone who I think is going to be a superstar. I don't rate him as high as Jacoby Smith, to say the least, but a guy with a lot of power, a guy with a pretty good striking arsenal, someone who can definitely dispose of someone like Potieria, who is there to be hit and is typically slower to the punch. For that reason, I think it's going to be a pretty fun fight. Like, this is going to be an action-packed fight. Potieria's fought at higher weight classes. He's now cutting down, and maybe that weight could hurt him here as well, but both these guys want to swing and bang, and in doing so, I just favor the Marco Tulio side of things. Enough to bet him at minus 550? Probably not, but enough to play him on DraftKings? Yeah, probably, because he does have power, he does have knockout equity, he is still someone who's going to get into this swing and bang fest against a guy in Potieria who has been knocked out early on before. So I'm picking Marco Tulio, maybe a bit opposed to the line, but 9.6K, has some DraftKings equity. Potieria has been finished in the first round a few times, and I do think they're going to go out there and have a good fight. However, Marco Tulio is extremely boom or bust, because if he does not get that first round finish, he will get outscored by the like of Smith, Aliev, and Almeida. So he is very boom or bust. At 9.6K, you need him to go out there and knock out Potieria early, or you're probably not going to make the optimal lineup. So a good GPP play, I will have my coverage of him, but not my favorite play in the slate. However, someone I'm definitely on my bases covered with, whereas Potieria is a dart throw. If he wins, it's probably by knockout. It's probably an upset, a very big one at that. So at 6.6K, I think maybe he wins more than the line entails, but still picking Tulio at a pretty high clip here. So punt play, if anything, for Potieria. And then the prelim headliner, the 16-9 Jose Johnson versus the 13-7 Felipe Bunes. A pretty fun flyweight fight here between two guys who definitely bring different styles to the octagon. Jose Johnson's been in the UFC for a while. We know he's got a huge frame. 6 foot at 125 is pretty insane, but a guy who wants to strike on the feet. Very diverse arsenal, solid power. Can wrestle if he has to, but has definitely been controlled in the mat and submitted down there before. Felipe Bunes, we saw him once. Joshua Van, he had some success early, but did fade as the fight goes on, which is typically the trend with Joshua Van. But Bunes is a bit different because he wants this fight on the ground. He is a phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner. He is the normal flyweight size at 5'7", so will be at a bit of a height and reach disadvantage here, but a guy who wants this fight on the ground, can compete in the feet, but the biggest flaw about him is he's there to be hit. He does slow down, and he has given up in fights before as well, with the volume accumulating. So in a fight like this, it's pretty clear, striker versus grappler. A guy in Johnson who has phenomenal striking, but has been submitted before, not to mention that twister, versus a guy in Bunes who is a phenomenal grappler, but can be outstruck, is there to be hit, and can tire out. And in a spot like this, again, if it was minus 110, maybe I get to Johnson, but I'm surprised to see Bunes as the dog. I'm going to take him in this spot here. I really do like his grappling. I like his entries. And when he's fresh, he can even compete with Johnson on the feet. I don't think it's an absolute wash there. Johnson's there to be hit. He can be taken down pretty easily, and he can be controlled in the mat. So I like me some Felipe Bunes this week. Yes, only one in the UFC, but to Joshua Van, a guy whose style I don't think can be replicated by Jose Johnson. So I'm hoping Bunes stays fresh. I'm hoping his cardio stays up, but I do think he has a ground advantage. So give me him to get it done here. DraftKings-wise, because I'm picking a dog, definitely a guy I'm targeting. 7.6K. He still scored 35 points in that fight there in a loss. So a guy who definitely has volume early, a wrestling path to victory, finish upside. He checks all the boxes. So him at 7.6K is someone I will be playing. Whereas Johnson, I'm not getting too dropped as often, not only because I'm picking against him, but also because I don't see as much wrestling equity. I think he's someone who is reliant on volume, and only he can get a late finish. I just don't know how much that outscores a Medic, a Ribas, a Moises around him. So a tough play for me to get to Johnson. Give me Bunes both on DraftKings and potentially on the money line as well. I do think he has some ground success here. On to the main card, 10-4, Punahele Soriano, 10-2, Euros Medic. I love me some Soriano. I backed him a bunch. Happy to see him succeed here, but he does have a tough test ahead against Euros Medic, a guy who is also a phenomenal striker, a ton of power, and people who will go at it. This is one of my favorite fights on the card. I think it's be electric. Two guys with a ton of power in their hands, just who goes out there and succeeds. I've been waiting for Punahele to go out there and wrestle his whole UFC career, and he finally kind of did last time, putting on an absolute beating. I mean, he scored 170 DraftKings last time, scoring 331 strikes on 5 takedowns. If you can do that here, I do think he can have some success. I really want to pick Puna, one of my favorite fighters. I do really like him. I just don't know if I can trust. I can't trust him to go out there and wrestle at a high enough clip. And even if he does, I can't trust him to control Medic and have the cardio to control him for 15 minutes here to win this fight. I think he has to get him out of there, and Medic has been pretty tough. So unfortunately, I'm going to pick Medic here. I favor his cardio, I favor his get-up game, and I favor his ability to keep a pace down the stretch. I think he wins more optics that way, whereas Soriano's more KO or bust. Soriano can take your head off, but can he win optics on the feet against a guy in Medic who will be taller, will probably have way more volume, and someone who can definitely keep his own in the wrestling? I think so. So give me a close fight here. I think maybe Punahele takes the early rounds with some wrestling, but Medic has the better cardio, is able to piece him up down the stretch and maybe land some big shots. So give me Medic. Pains me to say, a very, very fun fight. DraftKings side, though, I want both sides. Punahele, Soriano, if he wins, like I said, wrestling, finish upside, has scored 127, 123, 170 before. Phenomenal score that we'll be getting to him. Whereas Euros Medic, he's got power. We have seen Soriano finish before, and Medic in himself scored 103, 109, 121 in his last wins. So both guys scored very well. I think someone gets served here. I think it's going to be a fun fight. So give me Euros Medic in a fight that is a lot closer than the line expected. I'm cheering for Puna here, but gun to my head, I do pick Euros Medic. We have the 23-year-old, 13-0 Austin Bashi versus the 11-2 Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez has not said no to any fight. This guy is an absolute killer. I commend him for all the names he's taken on there. You know, the Isaac Dalgarians, the Simons, the Rosas Juniors, the Jonathan Pierce. Like, this guy, he steps in the cage. He does very, very well at doing so. He's extremely well-rounded. His cardio, his get-up game, his resiliency, and his boxing on the feet are all top tier. Like, this guy will fight for your money, and I do commend him for that. And he has been able to have some success before, surviving the early onslaughts of Isaac Dalgarian and Raul Rosas Jr. to beat them and show him that he's a true prospect killer. I do like C-Rod. He's a good fighter, but he is facing a certain prospect here. At 23 years old, Bashi seems to be the real deal. I mean, this guy has phenomenal wrestling, great transitions, very good hand speed. He can definitely hold his own on the feet as well, and he has shown nothing but good things inside the octagon. A bit undersized for 145, but facing C-Rod, I mean, it's not going to be as apparent in there because both guys are probably able to fight at a lower weight class. Here, though, although I'm surprised to see C-Rod such a big underdog price tag, I'm going to go with Bashi. I do like him. I do think the line might be a little wide, but I just think he's quicker than Rodriguez in a lot of spots here. Can Rodriguez have success maybe later rounds, but Bashi, I favor the better wrestling, better transitions. I think I like his hand speed better too. Can hold his own on the feet, and we just saw Rodriguez submitted. So if Bashi can land takedowns and maybe put him in precarious situations, I do think it finishes up there. I mean, although C-Rod has done really well against opponents, you could argue he lost to Dalgarian, and he only beat Dalgarian Rosas Jr. because of the cardio, to which I think Bashi got decent cardio. I still think Rodriguez can put in precarious situations. So give me Bashi. It should be a fun fight. I favor his wrestling and just how quick this guy is everywhere. I do think he could be a problem at 23 years old. DraftKings wise, because I said he could have some grappling success and it's so quick, 8.9K, I do think he could have some wrestling success and score very, very well. But this is a pretty high scoring slate. I'm not forcing in Bashi. I think there's other good plays. Whereas Rodriguez, even though he's gotten wins against good level of competition, I mean, he scored 70 against Rosas. He scored 65 against Dalgarian. Not the best DraftKings score, and I don't think he wins this fight. So I think he'll be pretty popular this week, but not a guy I'm getting to too often. I prefer a Caliari or a Lopes or a Bunes or a Soriano. So pretty fun fight. Give me Austin Bashi. I do think this guy could be a real deal. And then we have the 31-11 Chris Curtis versus the 13-3 Roman Kopylov, a striker's delight. If I'm being honest, one of the hardest fights for me to call on this card because I do favor Curtis in the boxing, but Kopylov has more weapons. That's how easy this fight is broken down to. So Kopylov has looked great recently. He's got more weapons. He can definitely kickbox. He can definitely look good. He can definitely compete in the stand-up, and I don't think there'll be any takedowns in this spot here. But Curtis is a guy who will go forward, has good forward pressure, and I think he's a better pure boxer. So I think this is a really close contested fight. After careful deliberation on this one, I decided to pick the Chris Curtis side. Not because of I think he smokes Kopylov, but I think the line is just wide here. Curtis has fought the better level of competition. He will be the guy going forward and potentially winning optics that way as well. He got pretty solid durability, and although Kopylov has more weapons, I think Curtis will crowd the kicker and is able to win those boxing exchanges in close. So close fight. I don't falter anybody for taking either side here, but Kopylov's a lot larger of a favorite than I expect him to be, and I do think Curtis can definitely walk him down and have success here. So give me the boxing and Chris Curtis. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I do think he can win this fight here. DraftKings wise, because of that, I think it's a 15-minute striking affair, not the most wrestling, not the most knockdown, so maybe not my favorite fight on DraftKings. 9.1K, I don't think I'll be getting Kopylov. Had to get 5 takedowns last time, so let's not include that. Before that, all his wins are knockouts, so it's hard to see how he actually scored, but 80 points in a knockout win, I don't know if he's knocking out Chris Curtis here, so 9.1K, I prefer a Bashi, I prefer an Almeida, I prefer Jacoby Smith, hard to get to him, whereas Chris Curtis, again, not the best scorer, but at 7.1K, you don't have to be. I mean, he scored 86 in a decision win against Barrio. He scored 95 in a knockout win over Buckley. Like, he can put on solid performances, and he does hit pretty hard. So I think he's a solid underdog play. I prefer Caliari and Bunes, I'm being honest, but I would definitely sprinkle in some Chris Curtis because I think he can win this fight. And although he doesn't score as well, definitely will have volume to go forward. So give me Chris Curtis. Fun, close fight. I do not fault anybody either side, but I'm surprised in the line the way it is. Then we have the 12-6 Abdul Razak Alhassan versus the 6-1 Cesar Almeida. Another pretty simple fight. We have a complete power threat in Abdul Razak Alhassan, who not the most technical, but has incredible power in his hands, but is round 1 KO or bust. Not much round 2 or round 3 success, not much decision wins. I think I need to knock you out early, and definitely has the power to do so, but he does tire, not the most volume, not the most wrestling. Versus a guy Cesar Almeida, who has been dealing with people like Abdulrazak Alhassan his whole career. He is a former glory kickboxer. Yes, he's getting up there in age, although still 3 years younger than Razak Alhassan, but a guy who has had a ton of kickboxing experience, who has shown incredible durability, and who has shown great volume and technicality. So when you compare the two, it's like round 1 KO threat, decision, and later KO threat. A guy who can maintain that power and just a better technical kickboxer. So I don't know if that tells you what side I'm on. I am on the Cesar Almeida side here. It's just tough for me to pick Abdulrazak Alhassan when I favor the technicality of Almeida, the cardio, the volume, the minute winning, and just the level of experience he's had on the kickboxing scene that I do think he's able to have success. Is Abdulrazak Alhassan easy to bet against? No. He has a ton of power, can knock your lights out. But Cesar Almeida showed decent durability, is younger here, has been fighting kickboxing his whole life. I have to choose him here. DraftKings-wise, though, I do think he's a solid play because he has a guy in front of him who has been knocked out before, a guy in front of him who I rate a bit lesser in the striking. I think Cesar Almeida can get a knockout. I think he can get a finish here, and I do think in doing so, can score pretty well. Has not put up the best scores on DraftKings, 94 and 66 in his 2 wins. Maybe that makes him a lower-owned play this week. So at 9.3K, give me some Cesar Almeida. Alhassan remains a punt play down low, but I think Cesar Almeida just has him covered in a lot of spots here. You cannot always count out the power threat like Razak Alhassan, but I just favor Almeida in a lot of these spots here, and he's getting an opponent that I do think fares well for his style. So give me Cesar Almeida. Main event time, 29-8 Santiago Ponzinibbio versus the 19-6 Carlson Harris. Another very, very close fight. Honestly, -110, -110 at time of filming between two older fighters who are definitely put their dues in here in the UFC. Santiago Ponzinibbio has been in the UFC a lot longer, fought some great level of competition, has put on some great wars. Whereas Carlson Harris is still newer, but still 37 years old, still has 6 fights in the UFC, 4-2 record. Both these guys have had some pretty good fights. Now, both these guys have their question marks, right? Santiago Ponzinibbio is getting up there in age, has been knocked out, has been controlled, is definitely the same fighter he used to be. Whereas Carlson Harris has 2 losses in the UFC, both first-round knockout losses. So they're concerned on both sides. They're both getting up there in age. They both offer different skill sets. I definitely favor the volume striking and the distance striking of someone like Santiago Ponzinibbio, but I'm going to pick the unorthodox Mozambique fighter in Harris, surprisingly. I like his front headlock series. I like his grappling. I think he has more ways of getting it done. On the feet, although I slightly favor the Ponzinibbio side due to volume, I still think Carlson Harris can compete. He can go forward. He can land a ton of volume, and we have seen Ponzinibbio rocked before, and he's facing an orthodox guy who can definitely land. And on the mat, I do favor the Harrison side of things. So you take the Ponzinibbio side, I don't mind it. I do think he has a path to victory in the volume striking, but I just think Harris has more paths to get done. I think he has some success in the grappling. I think he can even land a big shot in his own right. So at 8.2K and at a 50-50 price tag, I think Harris wins more times than not. Because of that, I think both are live, but Harris 8.2K can score pretty well. Scored 112 against Gooden, scored 112 against Casagne, 94 against Aguilera. He's able to typically score very, very well, and is very, very dangerous to finish fights, especially on the mat. I think he's got finish upside with the KO power on the feet, submission on the mat, can score very well. Whereas Ponzinibbio, I guess he's been knocked out before, so there's some upside on his side of things too, but hasn't scored over 100 points since 2017. Tougher look to get to. I don't know. I'm picking the Carlson Harris side of things. Fun co-main event, but definitely a close one. And then speaking of close fights, main event, 13-5 Amanda Ribas versus the 14-5 Mackenzie Dern. These two have fought before, and it's interesting because now we're seeing Ribas back down at 115. This should be a fun fight. Dern has been improving. She's someone who looked great against Angela Hill, but is still someone who is that same fighter we know. Not the best on the feet, is going to get rocked, going to get hit, but she's going to go forward because she wants to get to the mat. If you get Mackenzie Dern on the mat, she's dangerous. She's one of the best submission artists we have ever seen in WMMA. She's very, very dangerous down there, and you have to keep your eye out. But someone who is almost just as dangerous, someone who is just as credentialed down there, is Amanda Ribas. And these two have fought before and kind of canceled each other out on the mat, and it was the striking of Ribas that kind of took over. And it's hard to see if anything's changed since then. These fighters are pretty close. They're similar heights, same age, but I just think they're going in a little bit opposite directions here. Mackenzie Dern's chin's been following her a bit. I get to great level of competition, so it's hard to compare, but she's so hittable on the feet, and Ribas was able to have so much success winning distance striking, winning volume. It's hard to see her go against that here. It's hard to pick her there. And although Mackenzie Dern is super dangerous to finish fights on the mat, Ribas has such a high pedigree down there, it's hard to see her finish as well. So although Dern could have some success, she's someone who I like to back because she is so dangerous. I can't pick her to win minutes, and for that reason, in a fight I expect to go the distance, I gotta go with Ribas, someone who I favor the volume, someone I favor the distance striking, someone who has beaten her before. So I had to pick Ribas here, not with the utmost confidence because WMMA fight, there could be variance either side. Dern is very dangerous at any position here, but give me Ribas in what should be a very, very close fight. Because of it though, 5 rounds to work. Ribas has scored pretty well in the past, scored 115 against Araujo in a 3-rounder there. Now it's 5 rounds to work. I do think it scored very well against an opponent who is there to be hit, who is literally hit at will. So I'm playing some Ribas at 8.5K on DraftKings. Dern, also a little bit of 7.7 because she does have some finish equity. Scored 153 in her last 5 rounders. So should be a fun fight. Should be a high-paced one. I just think Ribas has more minute winning equity, and because of that is able to win a decision here. What is a pretty close, fun rematch here. But that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Let me quickly run into my quick picks. We're taking Amanda Ribas. We are taking Carlson Harris, Cesar Almeida, Chris Curtis, Austin Bashi, Uros Medic, Felipe Bunes, Marco Tulio, Thiago Moises, Jacoby Smith, Nicole Caliari, Magomed Gadzhiyasulov, Fedima Kline, and Narulo Aliev. On DraftKings, again, if you want to compete against me in these DraftKings contests, if you think, wow, Gordo, you suck, I want to play against you, check me out on the Iron Man, comment down below on Twitter. Happy to have you included. Up top, Kline and Tulio are tough. They have to have the perfect opportunities to play up their price tag. So I kind of prefer a Smith, Almeida, Bashi kind of thing, who do have that same type of upside, but maybe a bit cheaper to afford other people. Mid-range, Ribas, Moises, and Harris are all people I'll be targeting a decent clip, as well as that Medic Soriano fight, both sides. And underdog-wise, Bunes I really like. I really like Caliari is my favorite underdog play because of her floor and ceiling against a very hittable opponent. But I do think Curtis, Lopes, and Soriano can score very well as well. And then punt play is going to be a Potieria down low. Betting-wise, I mentioned a couple plays I like. I do like that Caliari line. I do like that Bunes line. I do like that Chris Curtis line, money line-wise. I also like some violence in the Gadzhiyasulov fight. I like some violence in other ones too. Check me out on Twitter at GamblesGordo to see my final slate of bets. Should be posted Saturday morning or Friday night. We'll see how things go. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I wish you all the best of luck in all your DraftKings and betting endeavors, guys. And let's make some money.